Hello, guys. Welcome. It is Hard Start Casters episode 1, and it may be the only episode we do. We don't know yet, but we're going to figure things out as we go. My name's Elfishguy, and if you don't know who I am, I'm an esports commentator. I work at ESL in Australia. Joining me is AVRL, who is the mastermind behind the series. He's an Overwatch commentator, lives in New Zealand, works in New Zealand, doesn't get that much work because he's in New Zealand, and that's why we're the Hard Start Casters. Now we do want to talk a little bit about Valorant, right? Because this is a game that we are pretty interested in. So, Avril, do you want to give me a bit of a rundown as to what's going on here? What are we
Right.
doing with this podcast or with this discussion? I
Well,
suppose.
what I want to add to that is, first of all, you said, first episode, and we'll see how it goes. Well, I think we're going to do this every time a new game releases. So, see you a couple times a year, maybe something like that. Yeah, I think the point of this is to kind of get opinions from, I like to call us industry professionals. We're hard stuck industry
Yeah.
professionals on what we think, this kind of game is going to have its impact on the market, and in just general, is this game any decent? Do we think it, without having played it, just based on what's been released so far in terms of information and videos and all that, which there's not a lot of, but actually if you do a bit of digging, there's quite a decent amount more of. So hopefully, if you guys have only looked at the website and the initial trailer, and you think that's it, hold on, because there's a quite a decent amount more info that I've been digging up on, so that might interest you. But yeah, and hopefully, maybe we talk about different kind of things in the esports industry or from a casting perspective, from our opinions
Yep.
following on. And lastly, just on that note, we were going to get hysterics, but then I remembered he's not a hard stuck caster because he's made it.
Yeah, he's made it. I do want to have two quick housekeeping things before we go too in depth into the real discussion about Valorant. One, graphic design is my passion, so if you hate this graphic overlay, well, bad luck. Or please make us a new one that looks even better. That would be ideal. And two, we're aware that Avril has a blurry camera, and there's nothing you can
Work
do
in
about it.
progress.
Work in progress. That's for episode 2, so check back in a year, and we'll probably have a better camera available to you. Um,
Yeah,
Let's dive into things though, Avril, because we don't want to bore all of the viewers. So, what are we talking about today? Obviously, we're talking about Valorant. I think that should be pretty obvious. And if you don't know what Valorant is, I think you've probably been living under a rock. But it is Riot's new FPS kind of. It's not really an FPS hybrid or anything like that. It is just an FPS, but there's a lot more going on in that. And we
yeah.
don't really know what's going to happen with it. But I suppose that's the whole discussion here, isn't it, Avril?
Yeah, and I don't even know that you can call it like the hybrid thing. That's like hybrid label for me doesn't really exist anymore, because since CS:GO has come out and we looked at all
Hmm.
a bunch of FPS games, what is the FPS genre anymore? Because battle royale is kind of it's FPS unless you're playing Fortnite, that's TPS. But I feel like it's a really broad genre now. So when I look at this and I see the abilities and I see some I would hardly even call them MOBA-esque kind of stuff, but
Right.
to me, we're not even in like a hybrid thing anymore. It's just it's Riot's first FPS. It's Riot's dive into something that's not League of Legends. The first time they're doing something not League of Legends. We've seen TFT, we've seen Legends of Runeterra. You could say those are new games, but still League of Legends. So to me, this is quite new. This is similar to when Blizzard announced Overwatch, and it was like Blizzard are finally doing FPS, and it's got nothing to do with Warcraft or any of the other franchises. To me,
Yeah.
it's about that impact.
So it's a new intellectual property. That's I think what you're
Yeah,
trying to get to there, which is a big deal. Yeah, of course for Riot because it's no longer Riot Game, it's Riot Games. I think is the joke that we've been seeing about the internet for a little while. Let's talk about the details of Valorant though before we get too far into the actual
yeah.
in-depth discussion of the game. When's it being released? What's going on with beta? How's all that sort of panning out? Because at the moment, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of available information out there.
Yeah, they've been. Well, we first heard about it quite a long time ago. I actually can't remember when it was the Riot 10-year
That's
anniversary was
right.
when
Yeah.
they first revealed it, and we got like some screenshots. We got a very tiny amount of gameplay, and back then, like no one knew. Okay, is it coming out in a year, 2 years, 5 years? It can be quite hard to tell. And then just recently, it was just earlier this week they did this big reveal. Back then it was called Project A, by the way. Now it's called Valorant. They reveal what the name was, and they're saying, "Hey, this is what the IP is. Here's a logo. Here's a new gameplay trailer." And it was basically a full round of gameplay, which is roughly 2-ish kind of minutes here. And they released a whole bunch of more info, a whole lot of like artwork and all sorts of collateral as well. And now we're sitting here. Okay, we got a lot more information. Release they said it was summer 2020, which means American summer is coming up. It could be within 3 months that this thing comes out. There was a rumor that it looked up on Reddit, so take this on with a grain of salt. But the rumor says beta could be sometime within the next 3 weeks. But again, that one is definitely a rumor, and there's no confirmation on that so
But
far.
you see,
And I
the thing with
yeah,
that is like I always feel like those end up being true inevitably. Someone's found something or seen something, and that I don't want to make a bet or anything like
it came
that.
from Sentinels. It came from Sentinels. If you don't know who that org is, they used to be Phoenix One. They used to run LoL Phoenix One, and they used to operate the LA Gladiators in the Overwatch League. And Sentinels, people in Sentinel, I think it was some of the players might have leaked it on stream. And this kind of is backed up by the fact that there's also been another rumor that says beta priority has been given to some major orgs and their players and stuff like that. So it does make sense that they would probably know. So if that's all to be believed, then maybe we do see something in 3 weeks or less.
That would be exciting. They were going to have that content creator day where they were flying a bunch of
True.
content creators in, and I think that's been cancelled, unfortunately, due to the coronavirus. So I wonder if that sort of changes the timeline for any of this, where they might end up pushing beta forward or backward, or what do you think?
Well, the other rumor is I'm getting really deep in the rumor mill here. That that content creator event was supposedly to also promote the beta. So if you
Right.
look at the timelines, and that content creator event is in about a week, 2 weeks ish kind of time. I forget the exact dates, but it's like mid March. We're early March now. It's mid March, and then if you think, okay, we'll add one more week after the content creator event, that's when beta starts.
Hmm.
All the timelines add up in terms of rumors. So to me, most likely is coming within two, maybe even 2 to 3 weeks, something like that. So that's probably what I'd be thinking right now. And I guess the other thing we haven't even talked about is what is the game? Like it's a 5 versus 5 CS:GO type game.
Arena shooter, I think, is the
would you?
way. Like
I don't think it's an arena shooter though.
search
This
and
to me
destroy.
is
Search and destroy is the name of. At least that's what COD uses for this
yeah.
kind of
What
gameplay, where you're trying to place a bomb or defuse a bomb or something like
is
that.
that the genre? Would you say CS:GO? Its
I mean,
genre,
CS:GO
its
is
subgenre. Is
CS:GO
it
is not
called the
really a
CS:GO
genre,
genre?
right?
Or
It's not
but
really a
it's a
genre.
subgenre.
I think everyone
Yeah,
knows what
thank
we
you,
mean, right?
subgenre.
5v5, bomb defusal, bomb
Yeah,
planting. That's the deal, right?
exactly. That is the deal. I was gonna call it a realism shooter because when I look at the battlefields and the CS:GOs and the CODs, obviously not the futuristic CODs, but like the old CODs, I'd always consider them to be realism shooters because they
Yeah,
go for more quote unquote realistic mechanics, even though they're quite arcadey. But now when I look at something like Valorant, and I guess one of the key things here is it's quite cartoony
yeah.
compared to the realism shooters, which people have either liked or disliked. So that's probably one of the main differences so far. So I don't know if I can call it that anymore. So yeah, I guess S&D, search and destroy subgenre type of FPS sounds about right.
Does look visually very similar to TF2, which is obviously where both you and I do have some roots. So that's kind of nice to see.
Yeah, well, I believe someone in the art team, maybe he's the guy, maybe he's somewhere in the upper regions
Yeah.
of the creative team, is actually someone from Valve from TF2. So that's why would make a lot of sense as to why it's got some similarities in terms of art style. And there's even someone went in depth into looking at the art style, and there's even in terms of red and blue how they differentiate parts of the map. So if you're hypothetically, if you're attacker or defender, you could be your part of the map as an attacker could be red, and the defender's part of the map could be blue tinted.
Right.
And some of the screenshots do kind of show that, and I didn't quite notice that because it was quite subtle. But if you really look for it,
Yeah.
you're going to see different parts of the map based on if you're attacker or defender are sort of tinted either red or blue.
I
So that's
really
quite
like that
interesting.
about TF2. I thought that was such a cool detail that you don't. I mean, maybe I'm just not picking up on it in other games, but I think that's something that is lacking definitely in esports and
Mm.
in map design. Anyway, I think we're getting into the weeds a little bit here. So let's just dial it back a little bit. I want to get your first impression of the game before we dive into the in-depth discussion. What did
Mm.
you think about the game when you sort of saw the first, maybe when you saw the Project A release, right, in that 10-year anniversary? What was your immediate thought? Was it good? Was it bad? Or was it a bit neutral?
So there's two. This is a two-parter because there's two ways you react to this. One is in a vacuum, is it a good game? Does it look like a good game? And
Hmm.
two, when you look at it from more of a pro or business or esports side of view, is like, is this a good game in the market? Is this going to be a game changer in the market? That's the two different ways I react to this. And for the game itself in a vacuum, it looked decent. It looked fairly clean. I thought graphically it wasn't the most insanely a good-looking game because obviously Riot want to make games that can fit on all sorts of PCs. And I don't know if you've
Right.
seen the specs reveal, but even the high-end specs, like what they think a high-end spec is like a GTX 1050. It's not
Yeah.
a lot. That's high.
Maybe even a
Um,
potential for that to move into a mobile game as well. I think that's still something that you need to be thinking about, especially in this day and age.
yeah, well, we did hear that Riot was getting into the mobile market as well with
Mm.
most of the games. But yeah, so from a gameplay perspective, visually, obviously, from all the games I've cast, so I've done TF2, I played TF2, competed in it, that is, and Overwatch is all much of the same. So this kind of almost cartoony-ish kind of graphics, I got no problem with that. I think it's quite cool. Um, Beyond that, from a gameplay perspective, obviously it looked very CS. I actually thought it looked kind of COD-like on the 10-year anniversary reveal for Project A when it was still called that. When you had the guy ADSing down on the red dot site on whatever the rifle was, and I thought,
Yeah.
okay, well this is, to me, it's almost like, is this the standard in the game? Is it like COD where every gun kind of does that? But then I see like the time to kill, and then I start to see, how it functions. And I think the main seller for me was when I saw like the AWP equivalent sniper rifle get that clean kill and then the stash right from the
Yeah.
very first trailer, and that to me was like, okay, this is a very CS type game. That to me straight away, when we didn't really even know what the game was, and people were like, is it Overwatch? Is it Fortnite? Is it this or that? As soon as you saw something like that and you saw the time to kill, you're like, it's definitely CS:GO like. And so I was quite excited by that. So initial thought was like, this looks decent. Um, Also, Riot have built up a decent amount of respect over the years, so it's easy to sort of trust that Riot will release something decent as
Yep.
well. And then you look at the other type of reaction. The second part of that I said was, what do I think this game's going to do on a more broad scale without getting too into detail about it? But it's like I sort of felt straight away, okay, this is huge. I felt the same way I felt when Overwatch was first released, about its kind of impact that it could have on the market. And Overwatch, when it came out, was an absolute monster. Like, you'll remember, it was
Yeah.
ridiculous how huge it was. And that's why when I looked at this, as soon as I saw that Riot was doing the FPS, I thought, okay, this is going to be Overwatch Part 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can really look at the parallels between Riot and Blizzard and the announcement of this game and the announcement of Overwatch. So that certainly seems to go together for me. My first impression, I have to say, was the same as probably yours as well. I guess it wasn't. I wasn't overly hyped. I didn't think it looked like an amazing game just from the gameplay that I saw. But I have enough faith in Riot as a developer, and I've obviously played a lot of League of Legends. I love League of Legends. There's a Teemo behind me, so I have enough faith in Riot that they're going to be able to make a good game out of this. That even if the initial impression from what I saw from the gameplay didn't necessarily spark a huge amount of interest or excitement, that I believe that can be worked on and that is going to transition into something that could be quite exciting. But anyway, there's a big discussion that we need to have about all this sort of in-depth detail and that kind of thing, which I'm sure you're keen to get into, AVRL. So let's start our first segment here. It's called AVRL Explains. Now, the point of this is that I haven't really done too much research into Valorant. Like, I've seen a little bit of the clips every now and then, but you've really gone and done that deep dive. And now the idea is that you're explaining to me, you're explaining to the audience, and then after this, I'm going to give you my take on what I think about all of this stuff. So let's kick on and start with, I guess, the in-depth detail, the game mechanics, and all that sort of stuff. So I suppose we start with the agents. Is that what they're called now, right? It seems like every single game needs to have their own name, right?
Something like that. And just first of all, I like to kind of think of the segment as my color caster segment,
The
and you
nerd
can
segment.
and then you get to play by play the rest of this. So yeah, so I mean, here's the thing about Riot is when they made. Okay, first of all, you have to remember Riot as a company. This is contextual information I'm getting into before I get nitty gritty. Is that when Riot make these games, they're not necessarily original. Look at League of Legends. That was based off Dota, the first Dota,
Yep.
and they sort of made its own thing very successfully. You look at Legends of Runeterra, that came way after Hearthstone. TFT, well, that was already, auto chess already existed, so they made it based off that. Obviously, you look at Valorant and you're thinking, okay, well, this is kind of CS:GO like, right? You look at even the other stuff they're planning to do in the 10-year anniversary. You've got whatever their top-down RPG game that is, and it's like, well, okay, they're doing a Diablo and they're doing a fighting game. It looks a lot like Street Fighter. So the first thing contextually we have to remember is, in terms of originality, um, for the broad strokes, that is, Riot is not necessarily interested in that. They're interested in maybe doing something that exists and doing it particularly well, adding their own flavor to it. So why that matters for the word agents is the fact that look at League once again. When Dota was a thing, it was pretty much basically everyone decided and everyone agreed that it was heroes. Everyone called them heroes,
Yep.
but Riot want to do something different. They're going to do League of Legends. They call them champions. And when we look at this kind of game as well, it's very easy to look at this type of game and say, oh, they're operators, but then you'd be calling it the same thing as Rainbow Six Siege,
Right.
or they're heroes again, but that's kind of more Blizzard type of style. You don't want to call them champions again because I don't know if it doesn't have that kind of League of Legends feeling. You also don't
Yeah.
want it to be too attached to League of Legends. So the next word they're looking for is agents. They want to kind of redefine what their character is, even though if you just break it down, it's basically a hero. It's now getting more into detail about what the agents are. They're basically the classes that you play in this game. So it's not like CS:GO typically when you have your T's and CTs, but really you're just the same. Yeah, you can
You're
pick
just a guy.
between SAS and GIGN, but you're just a guy. You're just a dude, right?
Yeah.
You're just all the same. And that's not the case. You basically are, for all intents and purposes, playing a hero or a champion per se. Um, but you have four unique and distinct abilities. There's a little bit of crossover, and we'll get into that a little bit more in detail as well. But for the most part, you've got four abilities that are not the same as your next teammates' four abilities or your enemies' four abilities, unless they're playing the same character as you. And instead of calling them heroes, they're calling them agents because, again, Riot want to be different here. And there's going to be 8 agents so far that have been revealed. There are 8 agents revealed, but they are going to be looking at releasing 12 when they're releasing the game. So that's a bit of information that is not necessarily super public unless you've been digging. 12 is the number they're looking for on release date. So that means there's 4 more that we haven't seen yet. We don't know what they do. They also said they weren't interested in having a release model similar to League of Legends where they're just pumping out a new champion
Mm.
every X amount of months down the line or whatever. They did say that the agents in this game have a lot more impact on the game itself. They're very concerned about balance, which I think is a good thing. And they want to take a bit more time and a bit more care to release each agent. So you're probably looking at something more like a, you know, 4, 5, or 6 month development cycle per new agent to really allow them to just get the game right and get the design right and make sure it fits in the game. It's not going to break everything. So that's, I think, the first bit so far about agents.
All right. You
Um,
want to get let me give my take here. I guess we do it by each dot point because I feel like that there's a lot to talk
yeah,
about there when
I'll
it
get
comes
your
to agents.
overall take. I'll get your overall take afterwards and
All
your
right.
overall new impression. But what's your take so far on that?
Yeah, I have a few questions with that because again, you look at the agents and you see how I like that you bring up the fact that they're not going to bring out new champions or new agents every couple of weeks because for me that was a major problem with League of Legends and it is a major barrier to entry for League of Legends is that if you're trying to play that game now, if you're trying to start that game now, it's very difficult to know what every single champion is doing because there's like almost 150 of them, and then every couple of weeks, even now still, I feel like they're releasing a new champion every 2 or 3 months, which is just adding to that amount of assumed knowledge that you need to have as a player to get into the game, and it's almost like you can never really catch up. And then the question for me becomes if it's in an FPS, I feel like there's even more that's going on there, right? Because just the nature of the way that the game sort of plays out, to have an extra bunch of abilities totally changes the game even more than it does with a
Mm.
MOBA. So that's an issue that I thought could potentially arise if they're going to go down that same route and continue to add so many new agents. I think what we're going to see is very similar to what we see in Overwatch, for example, where you do see a new hero coming out every now and then, but it's almost like every 6 months or every 12 months or something like that. It
Yeah,
doesn't
they do like
feel oversaturated or anything like that.
Blizzard, obviously not right now because they're saving all the heroes for Overwatch 2. But last year, for example, the year before, they're typically doing 2 to 3 a year.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, I'm as someone that's familiar with the Overwatch audience, they typically the Overwatch community finds that to be quite slow. Like they would prefer more, but I almost think I'm a little half and half on that because part of
Yeah.
me is like, yeah, sure, more content's great, and to be honest, I think Blizzard might be a little slow on their content side. But at the same time, I think Riot just coming out straight out the gate and saying, "Hey, we don't want to do that because we're concerned about balance, we're concerned about the state of the game and all that." And I kind of agree because I
Yeah.
almost think that Overwatch could do with, they're fine staying at 2 to 3 a year, and the people that are saying, "Oh, no, give me more, give me faster," if you actually got more and faster, they would then complain about, oh, the game is just wacky all the time now
100%.
because there's too many changes too quickly.
Particularly if you're
So
looking at it from an esports perspective, which I'm
yeah,
sure Riot will
totally.
have an interest in with this game. You think about the changes that have occurred because new heroes were added to the game in Overwatch. It seems like every new hero that got added had an impact on the meta in some
Huge
way, shape,
impact.
or manner.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, even looking at like Hammond or Wrecking Ball, for example, which I felt was probably the one that had maybe the least impact, that or Ash, they still got a bit of play as soon as they were released, and it sort of changed things up, and everyone was sort of wondering what was going to go on there. So I don't mind the
Don't forget
fact.
about sleeper impact. Forget about
Mm,
sleeper impact when everyone slept on Orisa, and then she
true.
was like the mad dog in the meta for like almost a full year.
Yeah. Anyway,
So
let's
I
not get
mean,
too far in the
yeah,
Overwatch discussion. That's not what this is about.
but it's interesting because it's sort of like it almost kind of relates.
Correct. Yes, we are.
Um,
We are running pretty low on time, actually, Avril. We've gone for 20 minutes. So
Okay. I'm
if
gonna
you want
run
to speed
through.
this up, let's go.
I'm gonna run through things a little bit quicker then. So
Yeah,
to just wrap up agents and tie that one up. So the last thing I want to say about it is in terms of design, hitboxes are the same, heights on the characters are all the same, and I think
that's
that's
good.
because they kind of want to maintain the CS:GO kind of thing, where
Yep.
like okay, crosshair placement is going to be important, and I want to know if I put my crosshair here, a hit is going to pop up no matter what agent gets played.
Right.
Next thing is you can't swap agents in the middle of a map. You choose an agent at the start of a map, you stay on that for the entire duration of the map, the full MR12.
I
We'll
like it.
talk about MR12 a little bit later. And so you can't change, and you also don't get to change when you swap sides. So, and they did say something about okay, there may be a case where this agent is slightly better on defense, but if you pick him and you're great on defense, but then you get to on offense, suddenly your agent might not be so good. So you have to really weigh up, okay, is that worth the risk
That's
of picking
interesting.
for the full map? You can't have more than one of the same agent per team, but so far, based on the fact there's only 8 in the whole game, the other team can have the same as you in terms of you can see your guy on the other team,
Yep.
one of them, but each team can only have one each, so
Okay.
unique. So that's the cleanup, the full cleanup on agent so far.
I like all of that. I think that's cool. I think that's really good. The fact that the heroes and the agents are the same size is really important in my opinion, because sometimes it can get pretty annoying in some games, particularly in the way that it looks like they're going to try and have this game play out. To have characters that took less damage because they're bigger or they had more shields or something would be incredibly annoying.
They
So
all have the same HP, by the way, as well.
yeah, that's great. That's excellent.
Add that.
I think that's good for agents. I think we've got a good discussion going there. Let's move on to money and economy, because that's something that the CS audience is going to be particularly interested in.
Yep. So we talked about the fact that game is quite similar to CS, so there is going to be a money economy. Screenshots are out there. The video footage is out there. You can literally see a buy menu. And in the buy menu, you've got all sorts of different guns in there. You have, from Henry G's interview that I listened to, basically the key guns from CS:GO that you're familiar with. They're basically in this game. The scouts in here, the AWPs in here, they all got new names, but they're in here. There's the M4, there's the AK in here, there's multiple shotguns, a couple of SMGs, bunch of different pistols. The Deagle is basically a revolver in this game. The things you're used to in CS in terms of guns are in here, but based on the screenshot so far, it does look like there's maybe slightly less variety than CS:GO. Maybe Jordan, you could correct me on that one based on the screenshot.
Um,
Um, does
yeah,
it
I
feel
mean,
like maybe there's
I think
slightly
it's
less
I think it's
SMG?
probably about the same. Yeah, there's less
That,
SMGs by the looks of things, but maybe
which I think is
not by
fine
a large margin.
because I felt like, and again, correct me on this, but I felt like CS:GO had a lot of dead weight guns that really didn't do anything in the game and that never got bought. That kind of just didn't make sense to be in the game, except for like, okay, they were in 1.6, so we'll bring it over. And Riot's just been like, cull all the guns that no one's going to use, and just have guns that are meaningful in the game.
Yeah, but that to
Uh,
me, that's an interesting thing, because it's like, okay, well, at that point, what's the point of even having an economy and choosing what you buy? You know what I mean? Like, if you're only going to buy the one or two guns, then why even have that choice?
well, I see it as being like, okay, why have 5 SMGs? Just have two. Have like a better one and a slightly worse one that's cheaper,
Hmm.
and then that way, like, there's a reason to buy X or Y. Like, it doesn't feel like, you know, I'm just got maybe not is like maybe it's more like why have 5 different types of sniper rifles? And sure, I'm sure You'll probably tell me now the Dak has its uses, I'm sure, but really it's not one of the core weapons in the
Yeah,
game. It's probably kind of funny, but no one's gonna look at the broad width of all the guns of CS:GO and
sure.
say, hey, all of them need to be in this game.
So
And
they
that's
are
what
trying
Riot
to sort
probably
of
did.
centralize it a little bit, it feels like. You know, they're trying to make sure
Yeah.
that there's only one gun for each role, or maybe at most, maybe two guns for each role. Or at least the role of the gun is what I'm talking about, not the role of the player.
Mm.
But yeah, there's at least I can see a little bit of a variety when it comes to the pistols and the SMGs, and in particular, it looks like there's 4 rifles at least at the moment. So I suppose
Yeah.
there is some element of decision making, but
There's
it's a
two heavy machine guns even.
yeah. The question is though whether or not all of these guns are going to be relevant. You know, because it may be a case where very similar to Counter Strike that the heavies are just not the heavy rifles are not used basically at all. You know, no one buys a negative
Mm.
at all.
Mm.
And that
Mm.
may be the case here, or it may not be. I guess a lot of that comes down to the movement of the game, but that's again a very in-depth sort of discussion.
And there is, by the way, just to clean up on that, there is a very expensive heavy rifle, like a heavy machine gun there as well. So, I don't know if it's a case of, like, obviously, more expensive gun equals better gun. Could be.
You'd
Who
hope so,
knows?
right?
The AWP is very expensive, as you can imagine. Speaking of things to buy, there's 2 different armor types. It's basically, Kevlar and Kevlar helmet again. Henry G explained it as basically the same, except this is where it gets very different. It does not function as you would expect armor from CS:GO. Armor in this game functions as like extra HP.
Right.
It's basically increasing your maximum HP, rather than okay. I think it's increasing HP, and maybe there's some damage mitigation in there, such as how Kevlar will reduce damage from certain weapon types and all that. But it's not like here's 100 armor. The 100 number, the number 100 on your Kevlar in CS:GO, from what Henry G was saying anyway, doesn't mean a lot. Like 100 armor and
Correct, yeah.
20 armor might as well be the same, right?
Yep. As
Apparently.
long as you've got armor, you know, it stops your aim
Yeah.
punch, it stops you from taking extra damage from mollies and
So,
whatever like that.
mm,
So
so,
do we
so
know if aim punch exists, by the way, in this game?
do we know of what?
Aim punch exists.
What's that?
It's where when you get
Sorry for
hit,
being
you're
ignorant.
yeah. See, this is clearly not someone that's played very much Counter Strike.
Maybe
Typical,
like 5-10 years ago. Anyway,
typical
what
fucking
what are we
Overwatch
talking
guy. If you get shot and your aim
You gotta,
gets
like-
hit
yeah,
and moved
you gotta,
around,
like-
that's aim
Yeah,
punch.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I don't know. No idea.
So in Counter Strike, armor stops that or negates a
maybe.
lot of it.
Maybe. No, I did not find that in my research. So possibly, but I have no idea. Basically, I think Riot's philosophy here is they want the number on the armor to mean something. So
Right.
from what I can tell, light armor gives you 25 more HP, and heavy armor gives you, they call it shields, it's heavy shields, gives you 50 more HP. And the heavy is obviously the main one you buy if you want all the goodies. So you can get 150 total HP. And I don't know much else more than that. I don't know if it really mitigates damage or stops you from flinching or
Yeah.
negates incendiaries. But that's armor. And then obviously the other thing you buy are abilities. So I talked about the fact there's 4 abilities in this game per character. 2 of them you purchase from the shop, and those are your utils. So you buy smokes, incendiaries. It's obviously based on character. Not every character has a smoke. Not every character has an incendiary. Not
Yeah.
every character has X or Y things you can expect from CS:GO. Some characters have some characters might have none. You also have a signature ability. A signature ability you always have on you. You start with this one. You do not purchase it. You always have this, and it has a cooldown of about 30 to 40 seconds, depending on your character. When I say cooldown, I mean at the start of the round, it counts down, and after 30 or 40 seconds, then you can use your signature ability.
Right.
But you can't just chuck it out right at the start of the game.
Interesting.
I believe anyway. Maybe there are some that you can, but from what I've read, signature abilities you can't just throw out right away.
I mean, that could totally
there's an initial
change as
cooldown.
well, like
Yeah.
depending on the way that the balance of the game is. Because a lot of the time in Counter Strike, you'll see a smoke thrown off spawn or something like that to block off some sort of area or something like that. So there may be a world in which you need to alter depending on what kind of ability it is. If it's a smoke ability, or if it's like, for example, a molly ability. I know I'm using a lot of Counter Strike terms, but to
I
me,
think those are fair terms, though.
yeah,
I agree. Those are good terms to use.
it
'cause-
really seems like these abilities are, in a sense, replacing the utility that you can buy in Counter Strike, because that's something we haven't touched on. You can't actually buy grenades in this game, as far as I understand. So
yeah, well, you have to pick a character that has it in its repertoire.
exactly,
So you have to pick the guy that has the smokes. Otherwise, your team doesn't have smokes.
exactly. So you
What-
buy these abilities instead of buying a smoke grenade and a flash grenade and a Molotov and a HE nade, and that's where that kind of ability or utility, quote unquote utility, comes from. So I think from what I can see, for anyone like, for example, that's a CS:GO purist and is saying, well, this game's going to be dead because abilities, blah blah blah. to me, they seem more in line with the utility that you're going to get out of the likes of smokes and Counter-Strike utilities, as opposed to the more outlandish utilities that you would say you would get in a game like Overwatch, where, for example, you might get an aimbot or a wall hack or something like that.
Yeah, well, those at that point, it's not really, it's barely a utility. I think in this game as well. So there's a couple things on the abilities to touch them, and one of them is the fact that some of them have charges. So, for example, in CS:GO, you buy like a couple of flashes and a couple of this and that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. So maybe you can get two charges of your smoke if you're the person that has a smoke. Um, and some abilities only have one charge, and that might be your signature ability. You use it once in the round. That's it. Some of them you get a recharge on it. So, for example, if you're playing Sage, which is the Mercy, the healer, the Moira in this game, if you're an Overwatch person, she throws out orbs, and one of them is a healing thing, and that one has like a 30-second cooldown, so you can use it maybe twice per round or something like that. And on top of that as well, there's different types of utils. So I think this is where they get to open up the design space, because it's not just throw smoke, smoke goes poof, and it covers an area. The smokes come in different shapes. One of them is purely spherical. One of them is a straight line. It's a wall. It's just like a smoke wall even. And the incendiaries are not all the same as well. One of them literally curves. There's like a flashbang that curves around. You can almost like aim. There's like a tooltip thing where you can sort of like curve it around a wall and left or right. So that's the kind of design space Riot are looking at, where it's like, okay, well, if we want to do multiple different types of smokes, how can we make them unique?
Hmm. So that's, yeah. I mean, again, it sort of seems like they're still a little bit more in line with Counter-Strike as opposed to Overwatch, regardless.
They don't kill. By the way, like incendiaries and stuff. From what I've read, I could be wrong on this, so I'll hold my I'll just bite my tongue if I am wrong. But they don't kill you, and that's been, when you look at the gameplay trailer we saw from the round, the guy sitting in the poison, which is basically an incendiary, got taken down to 1 HP. As soon as he walked out of it, he healed back up to the HP he was at before he walked in.
Hmm.
So these things don't kill you.
See,
These
that's
things
really
just like
interesting.
a pure utility, and
Yeah.
you have to kill with guns from what I can tell. But maybe like I don't know if that's 100% true, because I think if they want a true CS:GO like experience, they need stuff like HE
Absolutely.
grenades
Yeah.
to actually get a kill. I want to throw an HE and actually get a kill. So I think that maybe that's not, maybe some incendiaries don't kill, maybe some abilities don't kill, maybe some do.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a guy that's holding an AWP and he's able to survive on 1 HP and a Molotov, that totally changes the game for
That sucks.
Counter-Strike, right? Because you're trying to get him out of that position so that he's not in that position, so that he can't take that one shot and kill you on the entry. So I'm interested to see how that works. The other concern I might have here with all this is, you talk about the healer character. That's a big change up, of course, from Counter-Strike, because once you take damage, you've taken that damage and you just have to deal with it, right? So that, again, is another, it's going to change the flow of the game, maybe make it a little bit slower, where people will slow down and say, okay, well, if I wait another 10 or 15 seconds, I might get a heal here or something like that. So interested to see how that plays out as well.
And there's multiple different types. I don't think there's like heaps of heals, but there's definitely more than one heal. There's another heal, which is like, I think we talked about this off the recording, but it's like an incendiary. It's like a Molotov, and if you walk into it or a friendly walks into it, it damages enemies and heals you, something along those lines. So
Hmm.
there's different types in there as well. There's also an ultimate ability. So talk about four. One is a signature. Two you buy. The fourth one is your ultimate ability. So this is where the Overwatch people get to be like, I recognize this.
Yeah.
And you cannot buy this one. It has to be charged over time. And from screenshots, I don't know if this is going to be exact for every character, every agent, but what I saw was you need 6 of these charges to get an ultimate. You do something 6 times, and I believe kills get you in a charge. Death gives you a charge. If you end up dying a lot, let's say you're just getting destroyed after 6 rounds, you've died 6 times. You get this. You get an ultimate maybe. Um, and there's also orbs on the map, so at specific points on a map. And I guess this is maybe to add extra objective on the map, and these are very small objectives. You can actually channel to collect this orb. They're kind of in dangerous places, so you can't just sit there and just like pick it up, because you might get orbed or something like that. But if you do get it, it adds one charge meter to your ultimate to add up to the maximum of 6 before you get your ultimate. Um, and ultimates seem like they could be quite strong. Just to give you a bit of a taste of what some of them are. Sage, which is again the healing character, she gets to resurrect. That's her ultimate. Another guy called Phoenix, his ultimate ability is he gets to put a spot on the ground. He then can run into combat, and if he dies, he gets resurrected on the spot on the ground that he placed with his ultimate. So
That's
that's another.
It's so funny how all these sort of things come up at the same time because in Apex Legends they've just released Revenant, who has that exact same ultimate. It's
Design space. Am I right?
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, I'm again. I think this is something that would concern the Counter Strike community in that if these ultimates are too powerful and they're like a win fight ability, people are not going to enjoy that coming
does that
from
sound
Counter Strike.
powerful so far? Does that sound
It's hard to say without sort of seeing
ridiculous?
the numbers, right? Does he
Right.
come back on full HP? Does he come back on 1 HP? How long does it last? Like, can he hit the thing and then that's it for the whole
Mhm.
round and he can do it for the whole round? Or does he have to do it within 10 seconds?
So
You know?
here's a couple other ones. Let me give you a couple other ones, and then you can maybe relook at that question. Ultimate neural theft. Neural theft. Extract information from the corpse of an enemy, revealing the location of their living allies.
Yep,
Don't know how long that lasts for. Don't know
exactly.
if that's just one blip or the rest of the round. Another ultimate. Orbital strike. Use your map to target a location, launching a devastating orbital strike that pulses for high damage over several seconds. I can see that really ruining someone that's trying to retake or
Or hold a site.
defuse.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's stuff like that. I can see ultimates being major game changes. The one that everyone's seen from the original Project A game trailer is the person that makes a whole bunch of daggers. So
Hmm.
that one is like you get a whole bunch of throwing knives, and they instant kill on headshots, is one shot kill on headshots, and it restores all your daggers on a kill. Um, and that's basically it. Which I can see that being something good for an eco round. I'm not buying guns, but if I use these knives, man, I can get some kills.
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
Um,
that changes things up as well, doesn't it? There's so many things like when you think about it going in depth, right? You run into a lot of questions, and I feel like we're not really answering so many questions as we're starting to now ask, which is kind of the beauty of it. My take so far is it seems like it's going to be a very big departure from Counter Strike after hearing all of this, but
I'm gonna, yeah.
there's still a lot more to talk about.
There is. I'm going to wrap up abilities. It's just a couple more things, and then we move on.
Yep.
The last couple of things we'll talk about is abilities and I'll call them utils as well. Carry on between rounds and ultimates as well. So if you don't use your ultimate, obviously ultimates charge up between rounds. The idea
Hmm.
is you might get an ultimate if you're doing really well, maybe in like the third-ish kind of round because it takes one kill is one charge, right, or something like that. Or if you're doing poorly, you have to wait like 6 rounds to get it. Your utils, if you don't use your flash or your smoke, that is saved until the next round. You don't have to buy it again. So it's not like Counter Strike, you die and you lose your stuff, which I think that is a very big departure from Counter Strike, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
Hmm.
There is also enemy abilities have a red tint. So if you notice from the latest gameplay trailers, you might see like this wall come down, there's a bit of a red tint, or like the smoke come down, there's a bit of a red tint, because all the characters have. If you are playing the smoke person, and the other guy is playing the spherical smoke person, her name is Jet, and you both throw one, you can tell who threw what. So
Right.
maybe that's interesting. And other abilities can be killed. I think the main ability that everyone's up in arms about that people don't like is the Hanzo Sonic Arrow ability. I'm sure you saw that in the latest trailer. Um, and that one basically allows you to it pulses. It does like a one pulse, and it reveals a couple of enemies in the area if they're in line of sight. But if you are not in line of sight, for example, you're hiding behind a box, the pulse doesn't reveal you.
Right.
And the other thing is it can be destroyed. So, for example, if you see it coming in and you shoot this thing, you destroy it. Other things can be destroyed. So the other one was a drone. We saw someone flying a drone. That drone can be destroyed. So this is the kind of counterplay they put in this to make sure that there's ways to get around these abilities. And I believe, yeah, that's what all I got down for abilities. So
Yeah. So even, there was a lot of parallels, right, between Counter-Strike and Overwatch being drawn for Valorant. But from what I'm getting from this discussion is that I almost feel like it's closer to Rainbow Six almost than it is to Counter-Strike, where I feel like the abilities do have a fairly high degree of an impact. And obviously the shooting mechanics are like the core. The shooting mechanics is where you're going to win and lose the game, but the abilities themselves are going to be a lot more impactful maybe than some of the smokes and flashes and mollies and whatever it is going to be that you get out of Counter-Strike. But anyway, that's my quick take on the
one
money and
one quick
economy
thing.
side.
This is actually really important. I forgot. I don't know how I forgot this. I knew I was going to forget something. But in terms of money and economy, there are obviously pistol rounds. You
Hmm.
start with a small amount of money. You start with pistols, and then you get money over time. Obviously, there's the whole. I don't know what the full like how much you get for a kill or a bomb plant or anything like that. It also tells you what you're expected to take in as well. So there's I don't know if I'll explain it probably, but there's basically a tooltip in the game that's like, okay, if I save, this is how much money I can expect to get at the end of the round sort of, and then it just helps your like brain do the maths better
It's
for
just
saving
making life
FPS.
easier for the IGL, right? Instead of saying, okay, how much money do you have? And then they have to calculate, okay, how many rounds have we lost in a row? Which means then we get this amount of money.
Yeah.
The teammates can just tell them how much money they're going to get. So I guess that helps a little bit. Anyway, I think we've talked about that for a long time. Let's just go quickly into map design and philosophy, because there are some changes again from Counter-Strike that...
This one's quick. This one's not a lot on. So far, there's only 2 maps that have been shown. Well, the main one's been Haven. So the one that we saw on Project A's trailer and also the latest trailer, that's called Haven. It's the one with the 3 bomb sites. There's another map that we've seen screenshots of. It's called Bind. What we've been told so far is that there are going to be 4 maps on release, just 4, and maybe that's quite low. I'm not too sure.
It is definitely low.
And then after release, they're looking at a 6 to 12-month cycle per new map. And I think the reason why maps are coming so, and by the way, contextually, if you look at Counter-Strike, well, Counter-Strike had like 20 maps or something. You have to remember like 1.6 had a bunch of maps as well. So they just carried over maps. But this, they have to make maps new,
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
map design philosophy is they want it to be unique. The reason why there's a 3 bomb site map and Bind is a 2 bomb site map, so that could be new information if you're not too sure about that yet. Bind also has not only 2 bomb sites, but there's a teleporter between each bomb site, and it can only be used once, and I believe only the defenders can use it. So if you're on the defense and the attackers are pushing B and you're at A, you teleport from A to B one time only, and you cannot go back through the teleporter once you're through, and then you can quickly rotate that way. And so maybe the map's huge, I don't know. But that's different. Haven doesn't have a teleporter, but it does have 3 bomb sites.
Yeah.
And they said they want to have unique designs for the maps and for them to not just be like the cookie cutter 2 bomb sites, A and B, make the maps a bit different, but it's exactly the same. And there's pros and cons there, because I think the cons are the cookie cutter is not bad because it gives you the sense of like familiarity between the different maps, but also having different designs could be interesting. I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. It's a massive departure from Counter-Strike, right? Having 2 bomb sites means that, you have 2 places to defend that is split between 5 people, and you might have someone in mid or something like that. But that's about the extent of it, Most of the time you might have a 2-1-2 split or a 2-3 split, even sometimes a 4-1 split, depending on how the bomb site can be held in Counter-Strike. But when you add an extra bomb site to that mix, you got to think like, okay, maybe I can only have 1 defender on 2 bomb sites, and then I have to stack the other one, or do I split my forces evenly? And then in that case, if the enemy's coming in, it's like a 5v2 worst case scenario for the attackers, which is a pretty hard task to then hold. But we don't really know how the abilities are going to sort of, or the abilities and the agents are going to sort of factor into how the defenders are going to have an advantage or not. So for me, there's just it's just questioning, more and more questions being asked here instead of more answers.
Well, the can of worms this opens up is because they're not doing like, okay, every map has 2 bomb sites, and now when new maps come out in CS:GO, if they, we can expect, okay, it's going to be a map, it's going to have this, it's going to have 2 bomb sites, and we know that's going to happen. Now, it's like a new map comes out. Is this one a 1 bomb site? Is it 4 bomb sites? Let's even depart from bomb sites a little bit. We talked about the fact there's teleporters in the other map. Is there going to be teleporters? Is there going to be another mechanic? Is there going to be jump pads? Is it going to be like
That's
this
right.
or that? Or
yeah.
You've now opened this huge can of worms that anything can be in the map now. And that's either exciting or really dreadful. So I don't know.
It depends on which side of the coin you're coming from. I think for people that are from Rainbow Six or from Overwatch that are sort of used to this sort of stuff, they'll be quite keen to see what sort of new ideas maybe Riot has in this genre. But for Counter-Strike players, I think, again, that is going to be a negative, because for the Counter-Strike purists, it's going to be, we want to see the aim and the guns and the strategy of the 5 vs 5, as opposed to all this other stuff that's being thrown in.
I think the Counter-Strike purists might just want to stick to Counter-Strike.
Honestly, the more I'm learning about this, the more it seems that way. I don't think it's the Counter-Strike killer that everyone's saying it is.
Counter-Strike purist says to me that the game for you is Counter-Strike. If you're a Counter-Strike purist, maybe you can't play other games.
Exactly.
That's what it sounds like.
I'm pretty sure Counter-Strike players just want Counter-Strike Global Offensive 2, not Project A Valorant. Anyway, that's for later on down the track, I guess.
Yeah, and here's another thing interesting about maps. So first of all, I'm going to talk about MR12 soon, so I just want to keep it there, but I'm not going to talk about it just yet. But there's also just to talk about buy rounds and stuff like that. So buy rounds are 30 seconds, but you're not locked in. This is kind of getting back to economy a little bit, but it's also a part of map design because you can move around during your buy phase, and it's 30 seconds. You can buy anywhere on the map during the 30 seconds. It allows you to set up. While you're setting up, it's almost kind of like if you remember. Back in TF2 at one point, they had these wall ups, like CP Granary, they had the wall up before you get to mid, and you're
Right.
both just kind of
Yep.
like standing next to the wall, and then the walls open at 0 and you both rush in. It's kind of like that again, where um, the defenders can push right up, and there's these blue force fields. I'm sure you've seen them in the trailers by now,
Yep.
and you cannot go past the force field. And I don't think you can put any abilities that, or I don't know, maybe you can't, maybe you can or can't put things down yet. But it allows the defenders to just sit in a corner or sit somewhere that they want to be, and allows the attackers to just push up slightly, but not see the defenders and not get close enough to really get anywhere useful. So I think it's more to help the defenders than the attackers, and that's a pretty big departure from CS:GO in terms of CS:GO being you start in the same location, you're frozen, then it hits 0, then you all move. The other thing this kind of removes, it removes the classic. I don't know what's called. I don't. I'll just describe it as the Dust 2 thing. My lack of Counter Strike knowledge is showing here, where where the T sort of sits, where it goes down, the ramp sits with the AWP, and then as the CTs walk past the double doors, you can get a shot.
Yep.
That kind of thing doesn't really happen here. While in this version, well, the Ts wouldn't be able to go that far because there's a force field, and the CTs would already be at B or A where they need to be safely because they get to rotate there for free before the actual round starts. So we don't have that thing anymore.
Yeah, that's very interesting again because I think it can actually impact the design philosophy of the map if the defenders can get themselves into positions before the attackers have an opportunity to get there. It takes away that element of timing that the attackers have to be aware of to
Yes,
know
timing's
where
out
the
of this.
defenders could be because they could literally be anywhere in a sense. And that also can, in a way, I think, give them the opportunity to make smaller maps because now it's less about for the attackers figuring out, okay, well, we can take half the map for free already because the CTs aren't going to get there in time. They now can take none of the map, or depending on where the force fields are, can take none of the
Yeah.
map. So you can essentially cut out half of the map and just have it be bomb sites and the avenues into the bomb sites, as opposed to mid and the rotation avenues for the attackers. I wonder how
I
that changes
yeah.
things.
I think it's a new player helper because I think that's one of the quite daunting things as a new player. Like if I'm a CT, I'll use the Dust 2 example again. I'm a CT and I'm new and I'm just trying to get to B, boom, I'm dead straight away. And I've seen this. I've seen people stream, like non-CSGO players stream over to CS, and that exact thing will happen. They walk towards B, they get shot, and they're like, what? How did I just die?
Yeah, that is a
And it
very,
feels
very singular example, though, in Counter-Strike. On no
yeah,
other map are you going to have that problem.
right. Um
And it's a
and also
very controversial thing as well.
I guess, yeah. I guess it was right looking at that. It's the only example I can think of because my limited CS:GO knowledge is like, okay, well I know Dust 2 and I know that's a thing. Um, but yeah, it does mean that timing is less stressful. It also means here's another thing. I guess this is going back slightly, but you don't like throw guns at people. You can still pick up guns on the ground that we've seen so far in trailers, but like if you want to give a teammate a gun during the buy phase of the first 30 seconds, your teammate requests a gun, and then whoever on your team presses like, "Here you go, I'll give it to you," and you just purchase it for them out of your dollars.
Hmm.
So there's no more of this like thing where you buy it and then you throw it on the ground, and you do this kind of like back and forth thing. Um, just while we're on the topic of timing here, so I believe it's a minute 40 per round, 30 seconds of buy time, 140 per round, and people that are very clever that have been like counting seconds and stuff in trailers have figured out that the bomb time to explode is somewhere roughly about 45 seconds from plant to explosion is 45.
Okay. So it's
um
similar to Counter-Strike.
yeah,
What did you say? You know the round timer?
round was 140.
Again, similar to Counter-Strike. So the timing of the game itself seems to be more or less the same. I guess shorter because it's MR12 instead of MR15. Maybe a little bit more quicker, I guess, for an overall series. But that aside, it seems like it more or less goes the same length as a Counter-Strike game.
I
Um,
I I actually want to. I don't know if you're happy to, but I actually want to get into because we're kind of getting into the round information now. I want to kind of get into MR12,
yep.
and I guess from there, we're already starting to talk about other mechanics. But I'll just say it, MR12. What's your as a CS:GO person who does MR15, who the whole game is MR15? what is the difference of those 3 rounds? What does it mean?
I mean, again, it does come down a lot to how the economy plays out, like what the values of the money, like what the value of the guns is and the value of the abilities is in monetary terms, and how much money you get out of each loss or each win or whatever can impact a lot whether or not those 3 rounds are going to matter, because that's sort of the ebb and flow of Counter-Strike at the moment, is that people seem to be buying regardless, and everyone's like, well, why don't we just make shorter rounds?
Would you feel like CS:GO takes too long to play? Like
Sometimes,
a full MR15?
yeah, sometimes I think it does. Yeah, from a
You feel
viewership
like if
perspective, right? It can
do
go
you
for
feel
like
like
an
if
hour and a half.
Yeah.
And no one's going to
So
sit there for an hour and a half and watch a whole game of Counter Strike. Like, some
okay,
people are, yes,
if
but
if
by and large, no.
Valve or whoever knee-jerked MR12 into CS:GO today, what impact would it have on CS:GO? Like, what are we looking at for, you know,
Well,
game
a
plan
lot of
for
series are going to end a
timing?
lot quicker. I can tell you that much. I mean, we're going to have to see, I guess. The thing is with
Is that,
this
is that
kind of
good
a
or bad
question,
though?
in my opinion, it's good. I think Counter Strike games need to go just a little bit shorter, because a whole series, a whole best of three. The other night we had a best of three that went for like 5 hours
What?
because we had triple
Actual
overtime.
five? Are you
Triple
exaggerating?
no. I mean, we started at 6:30 and finished the series at about, I don't know, 11 or something. We had a 7.5 hour day with a 2-0. So
So it was just a 2-0 you did it for 7 hours.
no, we had a
Oh.
best of three that went for 3 maps, and then we had a 2-0 as well, and that
Oh,
went for
okay, so like
7 hours.
5 maps,
So we
right?
had two series that went 7.5 hours, but the first series was like 5 hours of that 7.5 hours, or 5.5 hours of it.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it's just a case of, like, do you think people are going to sit there and watch the game for that long? Like, when I think about how much free time I have, if I come home from work, I've got maybe 4 or 5 hours before I want to go to sleep. Am I spending all of that time, that whole time, watching a game of Counter Strike? Probably not. If
Well,
I'm just a normal average Joe that's not involved in esports.
I want to talk about this in a lot more detail further in the game in the next segment, which, I'm just going to add this now. I want to talk about problems from CS:GO and Overwatch, since, those are the games you and I kind of represent at this stage that we do a lot. And I think part of problems from CS:GO is I do think it's long. I also think there's no standard game time. And here's what I know about Riot design philosophy is over the years that League of Legends has existed, they've managed to squeeze down LoL into roughly about 30 minutes
Yep.
or so, 20, 30 minutes, where you can expect, okay, if you play a League of Legends match, or sorry, a full game, it's about 20 to 30 minutes, even at a professional level, and 40 minutes is considered late. 40 minutes at a pro level means everyone's got 6 items,
Yep.
except maybe the poor supports.
Even now,
And
the supports are getting. I've regularly
sure,
finished my build at like 25 minutes as a support now. Granted,
that's
those are
because you're a
games where
god
I'm getting.
gamer.
Yeah, that's where I'm being a god gamer. But like, that would never have happened like 5 years
the,
ago.
the point is, Riot have managed to secure a time frame for the game, something that Dota 2 hasn't done. Dota 2 games can still be like a whole, it could be anything.
Yeah.
Dota 2 games could be an hour, 2 hours. We've seen a 3 hour pro game, one game of Dota 2, just because it got that stalematy. I mean, maybe the game has been balanced to void that now, but the point is, for a game like Valorant, I expect them to be focused on, from a broadcast perspective, this is important, a very standardized time the game should last for. You don't want a case where, like, oh, let's do a Counter-Strike BO3 and it could be this time or it could be all the way over here,
Yeah.
like just wacky difference. No, it's just got to be it's got to be within this kind of, range. It's got to be this quick or that slow, and it's somewhere in between. It's not a big range. I think
Yeah.
that's Right's path.
That's one of the things I really liked about broadcasting PUBG, because PUBG rounds lasted for 32 minutes and you knew that you had 5 of them a night, and so you knew exactly how long the game was going to go, within maybe the difference being like 2 or 3 minutes, depending on how the late game circle would go. Like if a team was already finished off early in the late circle versus towards the very, very, very shrinking circle. So that was excellent. I thought that was fantastic. I knew exactly how long I was going to be there for a broadcast. I knew when I was going to get to go home, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But with Counter-Strike, again, you can take the example of ANZ Champs this last week. One night I finished at 2:30 in the morning. The following night I finished at 10:30 in the evening. So it's just crazy. The same amount of games, in theory,
And
two
by the
best of
way,
threes,
yep.
5 hours difference.
And that is not just important for like casters and how long
Cool.
we want to talk for or how long we work for, but scheduling is important, man. In
TV.
esports, we all TV. I was almost hesitant to talk about TV because I don't know at a more meta level how much TV and esports need each other, but whatever.
Yeah.
TV should add that in there, but scheduling wise, if you're booking venues and you're hiring staff, hiring contractors that you pay per hour, and all this other stuff, scheduling is important. Knowing how long things are going to last for knowing how long you can have a venue for, pack up time, bump in, bump out, all of these things matter. And for CS:GO, like really long games can totally screw with that. So I think having standardized game times, and this is where like part of the problem I see with CS is overtime can go forever, and I want a system. What I want to see in Valorant is I want them to handle overtime in a much better way, where either overtime doesn't need to exist, which I don't know if it's possible in MR12,
Can't
or
be.
if it does exist, it needs to be conclusive, like one overtime phase, and we know who wins. We don't have this like unending overtime that goes forever.
I don't know that there's a good way to do that though in a round-based game. Like even when you look at Rainbow Six, where at least what they used to do, I'm not sure that they are still doing it, but they used to go to golden point. So you'd have the one overtime phase, and then you'd have like essentially golden point, and it's like if you win that round, you win the game. But then there's always the defense or attack bias on any given map, and it's like, well, that's not fair, right? Because the other team didn't get the opportunity to play that side. So I don't think there's a way that they can possibly do that unless someone's got a bigger brain than me.
Round. No, I'm kidding.
Well, that could. I mean, that's a good way of splitting it, but no one's going to be happy with that result.
No one wants to do it. So maybe my expectations are poorly placed because you're right. Maybe rounds just doesn't allow it. But if that's the case, then that is going to be the one glaring hole that prevents you from having standardized match length, which means everything can just be whack. I mean, sure, CS:GO esports still exists despite the possibility of having long games. So I don't think the esports did because of it, but I do think it's harder.
Yeah, I mean, in saying that, some of the long overtimes have been the best games of Counter-Strike that you've ever watched. So there is that side of the coin as well. And speaking of a coin, that was part of the problem as well. If you remember at the start of Overwatch with the coin flip, it's like, well, I got coin flipped onto defense or onto attack, and therefore I just lose. So
I still don't like the fact that stalemates can exist, but it's better than coin flip.
Yeah. Anyway, have we discussed enough about the game and the mechanics?
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like you could go for like another 2 hours, you know. So
let me wrap up the rest. There's not a lot there. Bunny hopping exists, but not like ridiculous, not huge speeds that you can just get across the map on. It's just there to add a little bit more of a skill ceiling. They confirmed the reconnect feature to be in the game, so obviously this game is, I believe it's more like Riot will be handling servers, even if they dedicated 128 tick servers. So they are confirming 128 tick. So it's more like matchmaking, which I believe CS:GO fans might be happy about because I've heard the matchmaking in CS:GO is not great for ranked. So you can reconnect into matchmaking. Weapons will have unique reloads and sounds sound is a big part of this game in terms of things are louder in this game. Footsteps are louder. Abilities have ability callouts, and when the enemy uses something, you get an audio cue as well in terms of the ability being used, and also the agent will say something. They have this little quote, so it's kind of similar in Overwatch in that way. Guns will operate very similar to CS:GO in terms of they will have spreads and recalls and stuff like that. Some of them have ADS. There was a bullpup gun, and that can also change between full auto and burst fire. When you ADS, it's burst fire, for example. When you move and you try and shoot, an accuracy penalty, I believe, is more penalizing than CS:GO. And friendly fire is, I believe it's in there. We could see a little bit of friendly fire, but it wasn't prominently shown in any of the trailers. So I don't know to what degree friendly fire will be in the game, because you have to also consider all of the abilities. If the guy does the massive orbital strike ultimate, your teammate's going to get absolutely pwned by that. Like, what's the deal? So I don't know how friendly fire is going to be fully handled, but that's it for mechanics.
Okay, cool. That's crazy. There's a lot going on there. Now it's time for Jordan's take, even though I feel like I've more or less given my opinion as we've gone.
Your overall take.
Yeah, my overall take is that I don't think this is going to be the CS killer that everyone has been trying to hype it up as, or has been hoping maybe that it would be. I think the CS:GO players are still going to be very much... they'll jump on it, they'll play it, and they'll have a crack, but I think when push comes to shove, they'll stay with CS, at least towards the top level.
This isn't CS.
It's not CS. It's, I guess, similar enough to Rainbow Six that I could see maybe some of the players jumping across from Rainbow Six to Valorant, but again, I'm not as involved in the Rainbow Six scene as I am in Counter-Strike.
I don't think it's similar enough to Rainbow Six in terms of the actual gunplay. The gunplay is CS for sure. But the gunplay in Rainbow Six is this real hardcore lean kind of thing.
Yeah.
You shoot. Maybe I'm generalizing too far, but it's like you shoot a little hole in the wall and then you get this crazy angle inside this little peaky hole.
The question is,
you're still tilting a bunch.
Is the appeal of Rainbow Six the gunplay or the abilities and the operators and stuff? Because definitely the appeal for Counter-Strike is the gunplay and the shooting mechanics.
Well, Valorant's definitely got that part.
Hmm.
from the CS perspective.
But there's too many abilities, in my opinion, for it to be taking any of the CSGO audience. What about Overwatch? Is there anything there for you that seems like it's going to pull any players across?
Well, I think it'll pull players across just because there's a decent amount of frustration with Overwatch, and this game, if we're to believe it comes out in 3 months or in the summer of the US, it will come out before Overwatch 2 because Overwatch 2 has not had a release date, but the rumor is something like later this year. So because it comes out before Overwatch 2, and Overwatch 2 would be the one big thing that tries to keep people in Overwatch, a lot of Overwatch players will at least give it a go. I think most Overwatch players will play this game and realize it's too much like CS:GO.
Right.
So the opposite of all the CS:GO players are like, it's not enough like CS:GO. The Overwatch guys like too much CS:GO, and they don't want that because I've noticed a lot of Overwatch players, not all of them. You have some people from CS transfer to Overwatch and vice versa, and that's fine. But a decent amount of them play Overwatch and like Overwatch because they don't want to play CS:GO and they do not like the CS:GO gunplay and the CS:GO
Yeah.
type of gameplay and all of that. They want a game that's a bit more flowery, that doesn't have the same insane time to kill, even though there are some you can still die really quickly in Overwatch in some cases. They want a game that's a bit more visual, a bit more vibrant, you could possibly say. They want a game that's more focused on, maybe even lore or like character development and stuff like that, which I think Riot are kind of tapping into as well with,
Yeah.
with the fact that they have agents and they're named and they have like they look different and they maybe have backstories and stuff. Overwatch players are probably like that. But I think they're going to be turned off by the gunplay. I think
Yeah.
Overwatch players are not going to enjoy the gunplay.
So to me, it seems like a happy medium for a player like me, right? Because for me, Counter-Strike is probably not the perfect game from a player's perspective, but then nor is Overwatch, right? So they kind of have come together. I feel like Riot has come together between those two games and tried to find a medium for players that aren't necessarily on one side or the other of the fence. And they've tried to kind of fill that niche and wonder
And
whether
I
that's
think
going to work or not.
And I think Riot have done a great job, if you look at League of Legends, of really developing lore and backstories and their characters, and especially you start to look at, the comics and Legends of Runeterra, and there's a lot more focus on the factions and who these characters are and their voice actors and the voice acting and all that. That's a lot of Overwatch. A lot of Overwatch fandom is like go to BlizzCon and the voice actors there doing their thing, and we learn more. We get more animated shorts, and we learn more about the characters. And speaking on that as well, I didn't touch up too deep on the financial model, but it is free to play. And Riot, well, as far as my research is, there will be animated shorts for Valorant, and there's going to be a lot more of a lore push as well. Um, and in terms of, yeah, so they are going to be looking at that kind of stuff. They're not doing loot boxes, and they are doing skins so far only for the guns. And you can also get little charms on the guns. So if you played like Borderlands 3, you get like a little,
Yep.
I don't know, keychain
It's in
almost thing on your gun.
Apex and COD, I
Yeah,
think, as well.
there's also they're going to do a battle pass, so the kind of thing where you sort of level up your account and your battle pass over a season,
Yep.
and then it gives you rewards. And obviously, it's a games as a service, so they're not looking at a sequel or expansion or anything like that. So that's
Cool.
basically financial model in a nutshell.
All right. Well, that is that. Is it time now for us to move on to what I thought was going to be the major segment of this, but I feel like it's now going to take a bit more of a backseat. But it is. I think this is. I think this is the interesting part of the discussion
It
here,
is.
right? The impact that we think it's going to have on the market, not only for esports but just for gaming in general. And we've sort of already started talking about that with the parallels between Overwatch and CS. And I think it's fair to say that at least our combined opinion is that it's not going to kill either of those two games because it's just too much of a departure from one or the other.
Which is good because I think Riot need to carve out their niche.
Yep.
If they just like carbon copy the game, I think like, well, why do I play this? Except for like, oh, it's Riot, and they're gonna have you assume they'll have a good esports system, and you just like Riot games. But if that's not good enough,
well, I think that's a pretty big pull, to be honest.
it is. But take that aside, and you're just a casual who likes a game. If I just like a game and your game's too similar to my game, why do I go to your game? Is the question, right? As from a casual perspective.
Sure.
So it needs to be carving out a niche, in my opinion.
I always had this thing where, like, I looked at, how there's people that, like, really like Blizzard games. They're Blizzard fanboys and they'll play every single Blizzard game. I never really understood it, right? Because I never played WoW, I never played StarCraft, I never played Warcraft really all that much. All those games were a little bit before my time. And now I kind of understand that now that Riot is starting to move into a bunch of other games. I'm seeing that sort of happen with Riot games as well. And I feel like that's actually quite a big pull. It's like, if you're a League of Legends fan, you've never really played much Counter-Strike, you've never really played much Overwatch, but you want to play a shooter, which shooter are you going to play? you're gonna play Valorant. Like, no questions.
Yep.
Same with, like, if you want to play a card game, now you're gonna play Legends of Runeterra. You want to play an auto chess, you're gonna play TFT. They're starting to get that same model that Blizzard used to have like 5 or 6 years ago when Overwatch came out. Well,
Yeah.
that was not 5 or 6 years ago, but you know my point, right?
Yeah, and I think investment. I think this is why they care about developing lore and making animated shorts and doing more stuff that's peripheral like comics and just really getting people to care. Because why is there Blizzard fandom, or why was there, or why there still is because especially in Warcraft, you care about the storyline, you care about the characters, you care about your place in the world of Warcraft and all of that, and you can apply that to most of the games. And so I think Riot taking that approach is good because that's how they're going to get long term investment from the players in terms of emotional investment to want to keep coming back to this, not just for the gameplay, but for a bunch of other reasons. And smart is all I can say.
Yeah.
Very intelligent.
Absolutely. I think it's going to work. Let's talk about Oceania in particular, because obviously that's the region that we're hailing from. I personally don't think that there is any question that this game is going to succeed globally and
Yep.
domestically here within Australia and New Zealand as well, if that's part of the discussion. I don't see a world in which Riot lets this fail. They've already got an office in Sydney. Obviously, for League of Legends, the game was very popular before they came to this region. But I think now that they're already established within the region, there's going to be some sort of dedicated esports set up here. There's going to be whatever part of their ecosystem, like whatever ecosystem they've got, OS and Australia and New Zealand will be a part of it in my eyes.
I think so as well, especially because you actually there's a Riot office in Oceania, and there's been OPL, and there's been an Oceanic presence, and we've now even exported OPL players to LCS and all that. So yeah, it does make sense. It does, and also I think Australian players in general, Australian New Zealand players, have this sort of thing where they also want to prove themselves quite a bit, and that extends to staff and cast and all that. Where you want a new title means a new chance to like get ahead and sort of,
Break
and
out.
I guess this is globally, but there's a little bit more. I don't know if pressure is the right word for the Australian New Zealand audience, but like because you've got more to prove from this region, you feel like a new game gives you an even better chance to do that. Um, so I think from Oceanic perspective, that's all good.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to move on, but I was going to talk about the perspective from some of the other regions, or if there's anything else you want to add about
Well, I just want to
Australia.
quickly bring up the point in relation to Apex Legends, because I think that's been the last like big game that got released. And I don't see the same problems that occurred in Apex Legends occurring in this game, right? Where for me,
Mm,
what kind of killed Apex, even though it's not dead, so to speak, it definitely fell off a cliff, was the
yeah,
cheaters. You're not going to get that in a
right.
game that's developed by Riot. They're going to stamp that out as soon as possible, very quick, smart.
They
Uh,
announced that right away.
Right, and the fact that there was no custom servers, there was no esports, there was nothing. There was no ability to run any kind of tournament within Apex Legends that didn't rely on public servers. And again, I don't think that's going to be a problem here for Riot. Maybe they'll be a little bit, they'll hold their cards close to their chest and they won't give out the custom servers to anyone willy nilly. But I do think that they're going to allow a little bit more to sort of happen compared to what happened with Apex Legends, where there was like
Yeah,
literally nothing.
I think you can do custom games, and this is maybe getting into a bit more of a technical side discussion, but from what I've seen and how Riot operates their game so far, or the main game League of Legends, is you'll get the ability to make a custom game. I'm
Hmm.
sure this is my speculation. This is not from like anything I've read about so far. I'm speculating that custom games pretty standard with Riot. So custom lobbies to do your scrims, if you want to do your own tournament and do all of that. But are you going to be able to get your own custom server? Probably not, because I don't think Riot want to give that infrastructure or allow people to have access to that kind of infrastructure to do that. Also, I think Riot want to maintain control over that. So that similar to League of Legends, it'll be based on
Yeah.
their servers. So you can make a custom game on their servers. You can join their 128 tick servers. I don't know if it's going to be a case where you can join custom games. This custom browser like you can do in CS:GO. I think it's got to be more of a matchmaking thing. Like here's a quick play um, queue. Here is a competitive queue, and maybe here's a fun queue for an ARAM ish kind of
Yeah,
thing.
but no,
Right?
you can definitely join. Like, you can make your own game in League of Legends. Like, if I wanted to invite 10 specific people and make it a ranked game, but not ranked, but it was like a tournament game essentially, I can do
Yeah.
that in League of Legends. I think that's
Yes.
what you're going to get here in Valorant, which is exactly what you would need if you're a third-party tournament organizer, or even you just want to make your own tournament as just a dude. In theory, you would, I assume, be able to do that, but obviously can't comment in any kind of official capacity because we haven't seen anything to that effect just yet.
Yeah, well, you just can't have your own server. You can't
Mm.
have your own custom server, which I think for some
Yeah.
tournament organizers that could be a problem. But for other
Yeah.
people, it's not a deal, big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about other regions then. Obviously, we've talked a bit about OS. We think it's going to work. Now, there's a
So,
lot of discussion around Korea and Japan and those sort of
uh-huh.
areas.
And I'll start with Korea. Okay, there's a more overall kind of conversation about like FPSs in Asian markets, and then there is the reaction so far, and there's a bit of a reaction. Um, one of the ones I saw so far was from Korea Mulan on Twitter, who is the former translator of LA Valiant, and LA Valiant is an Overwatch League franchise team based in LA, obviously. And he's saying that Korean in-ven users are absolutely shitting on Valorant. That's word for word in the quote. In-ven, if you don't know what that is kind of like the main
It's like Reddit
Korean
of Korea, right?
online discussion board. It basically, yeah, you can basically say it's like Reddit. Um, Supposedly the main complaints are they think the graphics are bad, and they think that Riot is making money off of copied ideas from Dota, Auto Chess, and Hearthstone. And the quote that he
Okay.
put in there is, and he says, and I quote, "a true Chinese company." So they're basically criticizing that Riot are just copying games. I sort of covered that already. I think
Hmm.
Riot are not coming out with new ideas. They're just kind of like taking ideas that they've seen and trying to make it better or their own flavor of it, which I think Valorant is very much quintessential thing with the fact that it's like a halfway CS and halfway Overwatch
Hmm.
type of deal that is really neither game. Um, and the counterpoint to that is here's the thing about Asian markets and shooting games is Monte Cristo is saying, well, why does graphics matter when they play games like Sudden Attack, which have really bad graphics,
Yeah.
and stuff like that? And so I don't know. That's a good point. Um, and to sort of speak to that as well, Jordan, like you've done Crossfire. Asian markets have their FPSs,
They do.
and some of them have picked up some of them have picked up Overwatch. They haven't really picked up CS:GO. They've decently picked up PUBG. I think PUBG's been the main FPS game in Asian markets outside of their home games like Sudden Attack and Crossfire. So based on that, like what do you see in terms of the Asian markets looking at this game? Is this going to take them away from PUBG and the Crossfires?
I don't think so. Like, I think, particularly for Crossfire, for example, that's just got such a huge market share in China, but really only in China. So for me, that's going to be a big opportunity for Riot. Like, they're going to really want to push into China because if they can do that, they're going to have the whole world in a sense. I don't know that it's going to be so easy to take people out of Crossfire again for the very similar reasons as to Counter Strike, because you can see very extreme parallels between Crossfire and Counter Strike. Like, they're very close together, and this new
Yeah,
Valorant game
yeah.
seems to be a bit of a departure from both of those. The same for PUBG. It's not really anything remotely close to PUBG, apart from the fact that it's got shooting and guns in it. So I don't know that it's going to pull anyone across. What they're really going to have to do is like market it super hard, get people on the bandwagon, and once they kind of get that good word of mouth rolling, I think that's where a lot of this injection into the Asian market is
They
going to come from. Because if your friends are playing
yeah
it, you're going to play it. But at the
they
moment,
got
the problem with CS is no one plays it, so no one plays it. If that makes sense.
they got to use the Riot marketing
Exactly.
train.
Yeah.
This huge, gigantic machine, this marketing war machine that Riot have over markets with League of Legends. We talk about Crossfire and PUBG being big. They're both dwarfed by League of Legends in those
Yeah.
Asian regions.
Absolutely.
So if they can just really promote based on that, I think that's how they enter. But also, like, I mean, this is very on the topic of Crossfire. I've always considered Crossfire to just be kind of a knockoff of CS. Um, so in that regard, like, I mean, is it the case where like the Asian market just needs to see a better version of their game? I'm not saying Valorant is going to be a better version um, just yet, but like if CS is not like if CS entering the Chinese market isn't like, hang on a second, this CS game looks like a better version of Crossfire, and that doesn't get them over. Do you feel like a similar thing happens with Valorant in that case, where it's like it's not enough to get them over, even if
Hmm.
Valorant is going to be better than for example, Crossfire?
I don't really know, because to me it seems like people are very set in their ways, and they're once they've established a game that they like to play, they just play that game, and they don't really care whether there's a new
Even
game
it's
coming out.
old and not that good looking.
Well, Crossfire's been out for I don't know how long, a very long time,
Yeah,
and no
like I
one
said, it's
jumped onto
old.
Counter Strike, right? So it's like,
But is that a marketing issue, or is that because Counter Strike wasn't fun for
well,
Chinese
I don't
people?
think Counter Strike had a great entry into China to start with, and I don't think there was much advertising, and Crossfire was already in control. So maybe there are those things, but I'm not sure that if you're like a hardcore Crossfire fan, you're gonna be too interested to pick up
How about this?
Valorant.
How about this from esports? Talk about hardcore Crossfire. If you're a Crossfire esports team,
Hmm.
and like CS:GO didn't pick up, there's no CS:GO tournaments, and look, unless you're like Ben 10 or something, you're not making it out of China for CS:GO, so why bother? But let's say you're like the best Crossfire team, would you switch to Valorant because you know there's going to be like an LPL for Valorant, maybe
Potentially, I mean, it depends on the money that's involved there, I guess, because Crossfire in China has a lot of money, right?
more
And
than what? More than LOL? Surely not more
not
than
more
that.
than LoL, no. But
Yeah, then
But that's
surely
two
then
different games, totally different games, right?
I guess.
So, like, you're never going to get a CS player or a Crossfire player that's going to make the direct transition to League of Legends and do so easily. But what you're saying is you could do that from Crossfire to Valorant, because there are enough similarities in that you are shooting things. So that, I think, could be a big appeal, right? If they release with big esports, a good esports ecosystem, lots of money involved, and lots of money that you can win, I think that could potentially pull quite a few
What
people across.
what if they just repeated League of Legends ecosystem? What if they just said, okay, here's all the regions, here's an LPL, here's an MSI and a Worlds, just copy paste from League of Legends over to Valorant. Is that
That will
you
pop
know, is that
off. That will actually pop off, I think.
well? So then the Crossfire players will be like, that's for me. I'll do that. Right? Surely then the
Maybe.
Crossfire players are like, I'm switching.
Well, it depends, right? Like, there will definitely be players that would stay in Crossfire, but I think it would significantly stunt the growth of Crossfire. Any new players are going to think, why would I play this game versus Valorant? If that makes sense. But if you're already established and you're
Isn't
already
that
the
good
best,
for Valorant?
exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
If you're already the best in Crossfire, there's maybe no incentive to move over, because you can still win $500,000 if you win Crossfire Worlds once a year. Like, that's okay, you know?
Because here's the thing: is like we know, okay, the Asian markets, Koreans and Chinese, Koreans in particular, very good at like I mean, they're very good at PUBG, even though they. I don't know if I don't know enough about PUBG to know if they're like the number one in the world, but I know they were like super hyped up in the
Definitely up
global
there.
and like the World Cup kind of thing, like they were expected to win almost, and they nearly did. But we know the Asian market can be good at shooting games. They can be good
Yeah.
at FPSs, but they don't play CS:GO. So there's always been this thing like, oh, Asian market not good at CS:GO. Is this now going to be the type of game where like finally they care, finally they're going to put their
If
population
there's going to be
into
one
it,
game, I think it is going to be this one, right? Blizzard
and
did
then
pretty
they're
well
going to be
with
able to compete with
Overwatch.
the West, or
Yes, I think so. 100%. No reason that they couldn't. But the fact that Riot has already got great market share in Korea, great market share in China. They've got all the regions that they really want with League of Legends. It's just a case of converting that over to Valorant. And no other company has been as well positioned, I would say, as
Mm.
Riot has been to enter that market with a new game and be able to make it a success. So if they're going to care about one game, it is going to be Valorant.
And is that a scare for CS:GO then? Because CS:GO doesn't have the Asian market,
I don't think
so
so.
Valorant has both a Western and Asian market. Does that suddenly make things a bit scary for CS:GO?
No,
I
not
don't. I
really.
don't think it'll kill CS:GO, but
I
you
mean,
know,
CS is very European, North American centric as it
yeah.
is. So I don't think that makes much of a difference. Like, CS doesn't have Asia as already, so why do they care if Valorant takes it in a
Well,
way?
yeah. Well, I guess the similar comparison would be like COD. Like COD, there's no Asian market for COD, but like if you just play NA EU, and to be honest, it's mainly just NA. It's still enough to have a
Yeah,
functioning esports, and people still care
yeah,
about it. So hey, maybe you don't necessarily need it, but you'd like to get the money anyway.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so and we talked a little bit about marketing, but I kind of wanted to bring up the tweet from Sam Matthews, who is like the founder owner of Fnatic, and he said, "I have so much hope for this game, but please, Riot Games, let's make sure we have no blood and make characters not so humanoid, so we can stop the violence in video games meme once and for all. FPS deserves to have one global game like LoL, which is relevant in every market."
I really like. I like the fact that LoL is a global game. And I don't know that it's going to be possible with an FPS, because it just seems like there's too many out there and there's too many options, and I don't know that anything can come in and take the whole market like League of Legends did when it released. Because you remember, like, again, outside of Dota, obviously, League of Legends was the first of its kind in a way. It was the first big MOBA that was able to have that big push into every region. And
Whereas
whether
Riot late this time.
right or late this time, exactly. They're already behind. PUBG's already taken people. Fortnite's already taken people. Counter-Strike's already taken people. Overwatch has already taken people. You know, there's all these big games. Rainbow Six Siege has already taken people. And it's like it's a case of pulling those people away, and I don't know that you're going to pull everyone away.
Well,
and
they
be able
need
to
the
make
casual. They need the casuals, right? Because it's not just about like I think everyone in esports, like you and me and everyone else on Twitter who says they're now a pro Valorant player, they obviously think this game is going to be great. But if you're the 14, 15-year-old Fortnite kid, are you going to get pulled away?
I don't know that you are. I don't know that you are. Fortnite's so big in that market.
But this game's colorful. It doesn't have blood. There's no dancers.
Does it have a $3 million World Cup? Are all of your friends playing it?
Okay. So if Riot put up a $3 million World Cup, is that the difference?
Is Riot going to put up a $3 million World Cup?
Hypothetically, if they did, would the 14-year-old Fortnite kid switch over? Is that what makes a difference?
If they're not good at Fortnite, then maybe, yeah.
But I'm not. Again, but I'm not even talking about competitive people who care about money. I'm just talking about people who.
Okay.
If you're a kid and you go home after school.
I don't think so. I think you're playing Fortnite.
Fortnite or Valorant?
Fortnite is a very casual game. There is a competitive scene, and I greatly respect the players there. I think there's a huge degree of skill involved in Fortnite at the top level. But on the other side of the coin, you can very easily be a casual player and have fun in Fortnite. You know, you can jump in whatever it may be at this point in time. It used to be a plane. There's like portals everywhere. You can build shit. You don't actually have to play the game and win to run around with your mates and have fun. But in a game like Valorant, if you're not winning, and again, maybe I'm talking from my own perspective where I'm a very biased and I always want to win kind of person. But if I'm just getting domed out of a server and I'm respawning and running in again and dying, respawning, running in again and dying, I'm not having fun. So I think there's a very difficult position now for Riot with this new game in converting that casual audience, because I don't think you can do it so easily.
Okay, so is it a case? So because the other thing to consider here, League of Legends is, quote me if I'm wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still the #1 game in the world, right? Player base and all that.
I mean,
League of Legends, I believe. I'm pretty sure League of Legends. If it's not #1, it's #2. Put it that way.
Yep.
It's definitely right at the top. So, League of Legends is not. Is it a popular game for 14-year-old kids in the USA? Maybe not. I don't think that the Fortnite demographic really plays League of Legends. I'm pretty sure their game is Fortnite and they don't play League of Legends. So that being the case, those two things exist. One, League of Legends is the #1 or #2 game in the world, and they don't have the Fortnite kids. Does that mean that Valorant doesn't need the Fortnite kids? Because I'm only really bringing that up because it's FPS to FPS.
Well, maybe it becomes such a big game as well that then instead of talking about Fortnite kids, we're talking about Valorant kids, right? Maybe they are able to capture that next generation, right? Because the way I look at this,
or maybe they don't need any of the kids. Maybe they just like League of Legends. They just find everyone else elsewhere.
The thing is, when League of Legends was released, we were all kids. It was 10 years ago, man.
I guess
I was 15. So I am a League of Legends kid. Does that make sense? You know, World of Warcraft was the big game when I started playing games online. World of Warcraft was massive. Right. Then League of Legends came along, took that. Then PUBG came along for a little bit, died, got killed by Fortnite. Now it's Fortnite. So what's the next game?
But I think Fortnite is marketed to kids, whereas this doesn't look like a game marketed to kids. So I think the point I'm trying to get to is, how important is the Fortnite kid market? Because I think for Fortnite it's important because they're damn well marketing so hard to them. But I think if Valorant and Riot just want to take the same path of League of Legends, say we don't need them. We'll like to have it, but we don't need them. We can just do what League of Legends does and just get literally everyone else. You can still be the #1 or #2 game in the world.
I mean, I think Valorant can certainly exist without the Fortnite kids, if that makes sense.
Right.
They've got Riot has enough of a pull. It looks like they've got a good enough game to make it work. You know, you don't need to necessarily take anything from another scene. There's always naturally going to be enough people playing that game for it to succeed. But whether it's going to be the biggest game in the world hinges on whether they can take a big pool of the players from other games. Even it doesn't even need to be Fortnite, for example, but if they are able to knock Overwatch down a peg or knock if you completely obliterate Counter-Strike here and Counter-Strike doesn't exist anymore, good chance the majority of those players are then going to naturally play Valorant. But it's just that they already have Counter-Strike to play and they already probably prefer to play that they won't play Valorant.
So on the topic, this is related as well to like I guess like marketing to kids, and also just like the spread overall and how you can capture a wider audience. So the topic of blood and violence in video games and stuff like that is obviously relevant here. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, if you remove the blood, you remove the reference to terrorists, you remove the bomb. It's not called a bomb in this game, by the way. It's called a spike, and it doesn't look like a
Of
bomb. I don't
course.
even know if it explodes. Maybe it doesn't even explode. You remove all of that. You remove, you make a cartoon. And consider that most of the really successful games that have been released, like Overwatch, Fortnite,
Yeah.
it's mainly those two. Minecraft, maybe, they're all like kind of cartooning games. Like the more like PUBG didn't pick up in North America as hard. Even in the Asian regions, they had to decrease the violence. The blood has to be green, not
Yeah.
not red.
It really
So,
helps.
which I'm sure it helps. Do you mean like helps the players or like
No, it
what
helps the game, right? Because
right?
if mum and dad see you playing a game and you're 15 or well, let's say you're a 13-year-old kid and you're shooting people in the face, there's blood going everywhere. I know my parents didn't want me playing that when I was 13, but if they would have seen me playing Fortnite, they probably don't give a stuff. So that's where you are sort of then inadvertently, even if you're not like directly targeting that kind of a market, you are still finding a way to make it more accessible for them.
And I think that's the main difference. It's the get into the Asian market, the low violence and the cartoony graphics. That
Yeah.
means you can get a wider scope of people, and it's basically League of Legends all over again, where it's like it's fantasy, it's cartoony. You can put a G or teen rating on it.
Yeah. And not only
And
that, not only for the players, but for sponsors as well. Like, let's say this
yeah,
gets
oh
to be
yeah,
a
that's
big
huge. Yeah,
esports thing, right? You don't have to
TV.
deal with your non-endemic, non-gaming, non-esports sponsor coming in and saying, "Why are you talking about terrorists and bombs in this day and age?" It's so that's just completely removes one whole big problem that Counter-Strike has. So maybe again, that's a big bonus.
I think I'm gonna get to the end of this and say something along the lines of like I don't know that they need all the Counter Strike audience, because I think when you look at history of successful games, when Overwatch started to get really big, it's not because they stole the players from all these other games. They actually created a whole bunch of new players. And you look when I look, and I mean obviously small sample size. I'm only like looking at select comments and stuff like that. When I talk to people, when I like see people talk about Overwatch and their gaming experiences, for a lot of them, first of all, Overwatch. If you are actually an Overwatch fan and you watch Overwatch League, that's your first esport.
Mm.
You've not encountered esports before that, and that may be the first game you've really started to take seriously as well. And the same can also be said almost word for word for Fortnite, where that might just be your first ever game. Fortnite didn't have to steal people from. I'm sure they killed PUBG and stole people from PUBG, but a large percentage of the people playing Fortnite are also just people that don't really play games. They're jumping in their first game is Fortnite. So is Valorant going to be a game where they can just create their own audience and they don't need to take players from other games?
I'm not so sure, right? Because in the examples of Overwatch, I guess with the exception of TF2, there was no other game like Overwatch at the time. And then for Fortnite, again,
They
there
did
was
steal the TF2 players, by the way.
exactly. They pretty much killed TF2. So, but the thing is, TF2 wasn't a big game like to
Yeah.
begin with, in the sense of the likes of CS:GO and whatever. But for Fortnite, again, there wasn't really a game like that. Yes, there was PUBG. It is a battle royale, but it's a very different battle royale than what Fortnite is. You look at this Valorant game and you think it's a different enough from Counter-Strike to be its own thing, but it's not that far of a departure that you might choose Valorant over CS:GO if you're deciding between the two. Like, I could still see people saying, "Oh, I might rather play CS:GO than Valorant," even after Valorant exists. But with Fortnite, if you were going to play Fortnite as a new person that's never played a game before in your life, what other alternative is there to Fortnite that fills that same niche? There is not one.
Well, it's got to be PUBG or Apex, right? Like
But they're
those are your
totally different
options.
games. That's the thing.
Exactly.
PUBG and Apex compete with each other, sure, because they're a little bit more realistic, a little bit more Twitch aimy kind of, I guess maybe PUBG's not Twitch aimy, so to speak, but it's not as cartoony as Fortnite is what I'm trying to say. But for a game like Valorant, you want that Twitch aimy, you want that
Yeah.
gunplay, you play CS. You want the abilities, all that sort of stuff, you play Overwatch, right? There are competitors.
Let me tell you the games that are actually at risk then, because I think Apex Legends just jumps straight to the top of the list for me, and only because the esports scene is slow and it's not really happening, and EA and Respawn are taking their damn time with it.
Yep.
And I know that Apex players are frustrated and they're looking for a new game, and this is
Yep.
almost like that game for them. And there's enough like
Similarities.
gunplay and
Yeah.
ability similarities. And sure, it's not a battle royale, but I feel like Apex Legends is a game that is at most a risk of getting killed by this
Yep.
than any other FPS.
100% agree with you. I would then also throw PUBG in the ring. Not that it will die, but I think that particularly in OS, you will see a large portion of the PUBG players try at least Valorant and see what they think of it, which is similar to what they did when Apex released, but obviously they found that Apex wasn't what they were really looking for. But there's no PUBG right now going on in OS.
Well, I was going to ask about that. Is it because of the lack of esports here?
They don't want to quit PUBG. Absolutely not. Everyone loves PUBG. It's a great game. But the esports infrastructure, particularly here in Australia, is a letdown, as unfortunate as it is to say.
Speaking of, I think a lot of contenders players from Overwatch globally will be looking at opportunities, because I know a lot of them are frustrated. I know a lot of them feel like their opportunities in Overwatch are very limited. And so this could be avenue. So I feel like Overwatch League not really going to be that affected unless you're like a hard stuck bench player and you just don't want to do that. You don't feel like collecting a free paycheck and being on the bench. But I feel like if you're an up and comer, especially, and like if you're a good up and comer and you know like you're going to get scouted, you stay with Overwatch. But if you're like a middling up and comer in contenders, you're switching. So I think Overwatch is fine, except for the people that are frustrated with the game so far and want to just test it out before they go back to Overwatch 2. Overwatch is probably fine. You mentioned that CS:GO is probably fine just because CS:GO
I don't think anyone. Yeah, I don't think any CS:GO players are switching across.
What, any?
Not any. Like obviously there will be some in that sort of casual that are just playing the game for fun kind of thing. But
if you are serious question, if you are below an ESL Pro League level player in CS, do you switch?
I would say let's just say for the sake of argument, the top 8 teams in Australia, I don't think any of those players swap.
Really?
Yep.
Even if you're number 8.
Yep.
So it's the CS ecosystem is good enough that if I'm the number 8 in Australasia,
I believe so. I believe so. And I believe they also will have a level of elitism that will stop them from swapping to Valorant as well.
But well, because it's uncool to go to a country. Right. Fair enough. I can see that.
But if you're the 8th team in Overwatch Contenders, I don't see that. I see them definitely being interested in moving over to
if you're
Valorant.
the 3rd team in Overwatch Contenders, you're swapping.
Yeah.
Forget 8th.
If you're the best team in Apex Legends, you're probably swapping. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're the number 1 in Apex, you swap. If you're the number 1 in PUBG and OS, you swap.
I don't know about that. Maybe number 2. Like number 1's getting some auto invites and that kind of stuff, so they're still hanging around.
What about R6 then?
I think R6 has got such a great ecosystem that they're not going to lose players either.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I agree with you. Actually, when I think about that, and I think about what R6 are doing this year and next, I do feel like, okay, actually, Ubisoft are doing enough for their dudes.
Obviously, it's an expensive ecosystem. They're putting a lot of money into it, but you can see the benefit that it's adding to the game, and I don't see anyone wanting to swap over if they're already an established R6 fan.
We talked about Fortnite Kids, but I actually think Fortnite Pros may consider swapping, because I know that Fortnite at the pro level is not the best. It's very RNG, and I'm not just talking about the game itself being RNG, but the developer RNG of like, hey, let's just add some mix into the game. Here you go. That's in your competitive queue now.
That may be the case, but you also have to consider that the majority of those pros are probably also putting out content. And if they quit Fortnite and start putting content out for a different game, do they lose a significant portion of their income? And my answer would probably be yes.
Only if they're also content creators. Because there's also, look at the World Cup. Name the content creators. Like, yeah, you got the TFU in there. You got this and that guy in there. But then there's also dudes like, for example, before Booger won the World Cup, who the hell was Booger? No one
but are you telling me 99% of those people aren't going to aren't streaming already?
Yeah, but they're not all TFU, is my point.
That doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to be TFU as a content creator. You could just be, you can be a Fortnite content creator that's, like, there's a bunch of them from Australia that have 40,000 followers on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, do you give that up? Do you give 40,000 followers on Twitter and whatever that translates into on Twitch and YouTube to go and try a new game that, yeah, you might like better or it might have a better competitive scene, but do you give up all of that, all those impressions and all that, theoretically, all that money that's coming in from your YouTube and your Twitch?
Okay,
I don't know that you do.
if you're an influencer, I agree. But if you're a Fortnite pro that is not an influencer or not a big influencer, and you're like a very hardcore competitive person who doesn't care about, or who hasn't looked into that, then I
Sure.
think maybe you switch.
Yeah, but there are I do think the lines are quite significantly blurred with Fortnite when it comes to even professional players. I feel a lot of them are very good at translating their skill over
Mm.
to some sort of content as well.
And just because it's Riot, I have to ask, and this is only slightly relevant because there was a bit of a switch from League of Legends over to Overwatch. You got guys like Gamster and Bishu over, but those are the rare survivorship bias kind of ones. I know that a lot of LoL players didn't quite make it over, but would MOBA players or non FPS genre players consider switching?
I don't think so.
You
I
think?
mean, like, yeah, obviously there's going to be outliers. There's going to be a few that are going to swap over, but by and large, the games are so different that I
Game
think
might be too hard.
yeah, anyone that's not that it's too hard, but it's just a different skill set. Anyone that's a LoL
Mm.
player probably isn't interested in shooters to begin with, or it may not be their primary, focus sort of thing.
I'm just asking because it's a Riot game, and maybe you're like, hey,
I can
like,
see, like I said with the example earlier, I can see that if anyone was interested in playing a shooter and they were a LoL player, that the first one they would pick up would be Valorant. But I don't think that you're going to see people specifically leave League of Legends to try and play Valorant.
okay, you ready for the you ready for the controversial
All right,
question? If
it's better be good. You've hyped it up.
if you're a hard stuck caster, do you switch?
Well, I think we've already seen the answer to that. A lot of people have already put their hands up and said, "I want to cast Valorant." Like, dude, you've never even played the game.
In my Twitter profile, it's real. I'm already a pro.
There is gonna be a lot of people that are gonna try and swap over. I would say, particularly in Australia,
That was
right?
a dangerous question.
No, I mean seriously, like if you're trying to grind away and trying to get into Counter Strike, as I know a lot of casters are right now.
Damn it! Now I have to compete with Mac. Oh,
Yeah,
jeez.
well, he's kind of already established in CS, but like for the people that are just below that rung, the ones that are doing the bedroom casts, it's like,
Right.
what reason do you have for doing CS still? I mean, the argument is going to be, right, with Valorant, the question, argument, whatever, is going to be, is it going to be handled the same way by Riot as League of Legends is? In that they are going to do all of the production, broadcast, talent, etc. in-house.
You would assume so.
Or is there going to be opportunities for people to build like they do in CS? And I agree with you. I assume that Riot is going to handle it in-house, which is going to make that barrier to entry all the more higher and potentially going to make it almost impossible to just directly swap over from one game to another, because what are you going to cast? If there's no open competitions.
But there might be to start with, because they're not. I don't see them launch. They could hypothetically, but I don't see them feasibly launching an LCS like day one, right?
No, they're probably not. Probably not. But
so there's going to be some third-party stuff to start with. I would imagine.
yeah, but then you might go and swap over to those. Like you might go and do those kinds of things, right? Same with what we saw from Overwatch. People jumped in on Overwatch, but not all of the casters that started casting Overwatch at that time are still casting Overwatch because they've either been weeded out, they weren't favored by Blizzard, and therefore they didn't cast Overwatch League, or they didn't cast contenders. And as a result, they don't cast Overwatch anymore because there's no Overwatch to cast unless you're involved in the ecosystem.
Yeah. And I guess my last follow-up would be like, you know, in terms of ecosystem, we've just assumed they're just going to roll out the LCKs and the LPLs and the OPLs. But what if they didn't? And should they or shouldn't they? Should they do more of a Counter-Strike thing where it's like majors
Yeah,
and all that,
that's
or
a big question, isn't
what?
it?
Because they actually have the opportunity to say, hey, maybe we don't repeat the whole like split MSI split worlds thing, and maybe we can do a different thing altogether. And hey, maybe that would be more familiar for the CS community.
I don't
What do
see
you think
that
about
being something that Riot will want to do. I think they want to keep control of their product. And that
Yeah, but
seems to be the
they
way that
can
the
do
devs
the
are going.
majors. They don't have to release control. They can still do the majors.
You say that, but like if Elfishguy Esports Enterprises wants to run a CS:GO tournament and draw a giant dick on the screen, I can do that. Do you think Riot wants to allow that possibility with Valorant?
Okay, no. What I'm saying is they're not. Okay, I don't see them allowing third parties a lot of entries into especially the top level. But what I'm saying is, if you're Riot right now, instead of doing the typical, like I said, split MSI split worlds thing, you internally do majors. You internally do a different ecosystem. Let's use the R6 ecosystem for example. 3 majors and a worlds or
Right.
and an invite. but it's all handled by Ubisoft. I don't know if it is, but we'll say for Riot's version, it's all handled by Riot. So Elfishguy Industries can't do a major. Is that good?
Well,
for
what point
game
is
like
there for
Valorant?
me then to do a major? You know what I mean? Like,
No,
and not a
the
major.
whole point
Sorry,
is you don't.
no. I mean, I'm saying, what point is there for me to run another tournament if I can't potentially do a top level
No,
tournament?
I'm saying, is it good for the? Would it be good for the ecosystem of the game, in your opinion, if they did a more Counter-Strike version of an ecosystem, except obviously Riot control everything and it's not third party, versus doing this typical League of Legends ecosystem?
I'm not sure that they can do that without it being like the League of Legends ecosystem. Like, I'm not sure that, like, what is the Counter-Strike ecosystem if not an open ecosystem where anyone can run it? That's
Okay,
what it
so
is.
okay, so what? Okay, what if it was more like R6 then, where I don't know if Ubisoft do all the majors, but like if they did, what
They're
if it's
white
more
labeled
like
by
the
yourself for the sake of argument.
other?
But
Okay, well, okay, sure. What about Dota? Is Dota doing like a 3 major worlds international thing now as well, aren't they?
sure,
So
right, okay, that's maybe a
what
bit
about
more.
that?
I, well, the problem with Dota is obviously that there's so much money associated with the one event that if you win the one event, you don't give a shit about all the other ones. My personal feelings is if it was like CS, that's the best ecosystem that you can have because that allows TOs to do as many tournaments as they want. Yes, there is a degree of oversaturation, but there's the ability for anyone to get in at any time and do whatever they want, if that makes sense. Whereas
Yeah.
with something like Overwatch League, something with LCS, whatever, you can only be involved with that if you're involved with Riot or Blizzard or whatever it may be. So, in my opinion, give it to the open tournaments. However, I don't think that's what Riot will do. I think they're
No.
very eager to control their own product, and that they'll follow very much the same route as League of Legends and do the LCSs or whatever it is, and have their product be their product, and no one else is really going to be able to run anything of significance.
And that makes sense. That's Riot's MO. It's a proven model from League of Legends, and there's no reason to deviate
Yeah,
from it.
and I think it works well for them, to be honest. Like, they have great broadcasts, they have very well controlled broadcasts, the quality is always good. You know,
It's a good esport.
you don't ever see a League of Legends event that's just absolutely dog shit. But you do see that with Counter Strike. You do sometimes see that with the likes of Dota, etc. So that's that's the difference I think for them. Just a different school of thought.
Well, I can't wait to see if I miss out on a beta key. I'll probably miss out on a beta key.
Yeah.
To give it a go because I think it's all like kind of good. It's been healthy speculation, but I think like actually playing the game and just confirming whether it's good or bad. And I don't know. There's been no talk about spectator tools. Like in the interviews I've heard, like from Henry G and all that, there's been no like information about any esports or spectator tools or any TO focused stuff.
Yeah, I
So
really
it's a
hope
big
that.
question mark.
Yeah, I hope that it sort of all ships with that because I think again that will be a big part of whether or not this game succeeds. You know, if you don't ship with a within 6 months some sort of esports plan, you don't ship with spectator tools for tournaments.
You become Apex Legends.
You don't ship with you don't ship with custom servers. You don't ship with anti-cheat. Yeah, exactly. You become Apex Legends. The game dies too quickly, and you're never able to revive it, unfortunately. So we'll see how that goes. I think we're pretty much at the end of things here, Avril. One quick last segment. Predictions. Is the game going to succeed? And you can add your final comment in here as well.
Yes, because it's Riot and it's like the most hyped up game from them since
ever.
Yeah, it is. It is just the most hyped up game. But it's not, like I said, it's not just them. Like it's the fact that it's just there's finally a potential competitor to the CS:GOs and the Overwatches more so than, and that's what's good for the system. That's good for everyone, and regardless of whether I want to do this game or what this impact of the game is on me, it's good for the every game that we currently do, be it CS:GO or Overwatch, because it puts pressure on them. But my final comment was going to be that I would definitely be keen to give it a go because why wouldn't you?
Well, I think that is that's your thoughts in a nutshell, right? If you're willing to give it a go as an Overwatch player, as an Overwatch caster, and someone that's been involved in esports for a long time, I think that translates across to a lot of people as well. And I'll echo your thoughts. I think that the game will succeed. Riot is too big to allow it to fail. It does have enough of point of differences between CS and Overwatch and Rainbow Six to be its own thing, but I don't think it's going to kill any of those games. And I similarly would also be pretty interested to give it a go. We'll see whether or not it's going to join my repertoire as something that I really enjoy playing, if it's going to be an everyday sort of thing, or if it's just going to be something I try for a little bit and then pass on.
Oh.
That really depends on whether or not the game succeeds as an esport, because I'm always very interested in the esports side of things, and whether I'm any good at it, because I always like to win at games. But that's it from Hard Start Casters for episode 1.
Soon to be world's best Valorant casters, Hard Start casters for now.
Exactly. Watch out for the Elfishguy and AVRL duo. We'll be casting the Season 1 Valorant Worlds. If you have any questions, feedback, whatever, make sure you drop them in the YouTube comments or send us a tweet. I'm at Elfishguy. I'm AVRL on the screen, if you're wondering. If you got to this point, an hour and 44 minutes later, credit to you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, we'll do a few more things like this. Probably not this long, and maybe not on Valorant anymore. Depends. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe we want to keep going down that route. But that's it from us today. Thank you for checking it out, and I guess we'll hopefully see you next time.